Do you have a child that struggles in the traditional school setting, in the public school setting? I know I did academically. I remember it took so much energy out of me in high school just to put on my mask and try to fit in and try to get people to like me and be social and all of that energy it took out of me. It was hard for me to actually learn the academics. At the same time, was the academics that important at that point when I was going through a lot of anxiety and distress? When I look back at it, I wish I had some kind of alternative school experience that would have supported me more, supported my gifts, just made me really feel into who I was instead of really trying to fit in all the time, which takes a lot of energy for kids. Whether your kid seems or has been labeled sensitive, neurodivergent, on the spectrum, has been tested and is ADHD, dyslexic, or maybe you have an idea that they are and they struggle in the traditional setting, it's important to realize it doesn't make them deficient. It just makes them a little different from the mainstream or what the traditional school setting is trying to do. I mean, years ago, when in the Industrial Revolution, when schools were created, these it was created for kids to be mass produced basically into the workforce. It wasn't created to individualize people. So it's just like everyone was just thrown into this huge classroom, and there wasn't a lot of individualization going on there. Differentiation is what we call it today. And as a former public school teacher, I know that the schools do try really hard to help those kids that need different structures. And it's good teaching practice to differentiate in the classroom. There's some group work, there's some not group work, just individual work. There's, using voice more, using movements. But it can be really hard to add that in all the time with a huge class of 30 kids. It's just really, really hard. And it's draining on the teachers, draining on the kids. It's really not ideal. Smaller class settings and alternative class settings are ideal for many kids. I would say 50% of the kids would do so much better if they had a smaller classroom and they had more individual attention and they were able to express themselves in different ways. So they had a little bit of structure, but not too much. Everybody's different. So it's really hard to just clump them all together. So I'm going to go over some key points of what I feel is affecting um, these kids that are different, that are sensitive, neurodivergent, on the spectrum somewhat, um, labeled awkward or odd or antisocial. I have a heart for these, a love for these kids. I have a love for all kids, but my heart just is pulled to help those that feel like they don't fit in, or a lot of these kids don't even care to fit in, but they're trying because they're told they have to. And so I'm here to I feel like it's part of my passion to help these kids feel just accepted for who they are and to be seen and heard more. So the first point I wanted to make about traditional school settings, public school settings, even some alternative school settings can have so much stimulation going on. So the environment can cause a lot of problems for sensitive kids, neurodivergent kids. That is, the fluorescent lighting is horrible. Even me as a teacher, I just did not like that lighting. I would bring in lamps and turn off the lights whenever I could, the big lights. Fluorescent lighting is just not good for anyone, I think. And then the constant noise that's going on, especially if you're going out in the hallway, if you're switching classes like in middle school and high school. I know as a teen, switching classes in high school was so overwhelming for me because I would go into the hallway with all these people. And I was shy, but I was also social back then. So it wasn't like I was hiding from people or felt awkward or anything. But I did feel like the spotlight effect. Everybody's looking at me. My heart's beating fast. I just wanted to get to my next class and sit down. I didn't want anyone to look at me. I didn't want to hear any of the noise. It was just so overstimulating and draining for me. And so imagine being these students that are super sensitive to sound and light and having to deal with that. Oh, and not to mention the cafeteria, how noisy it is in there. Oh gosh. As a teacher, it was hard for me. I remember when my daughter was in public school and I would go visit her in elementary for lunch, it was so noisy. I I just couldn't even imagine how that would be good for a kid to be around that constant noise like that for lunch. It was not relaxing. These kids, these sensitive, neurodivergent, these kids that are just out of the norm, out of the box of that society is trying to put us in, they process things differently. They need more time. So traditional school settings are set up as, the teacher's asking questions and trying to get the class involved. And they may call on a kid, and that kid needs time to process. They can't think of the answer right away. And some kids have a lot of anxiety about that. And I know kids that I've worked with, that's been some of their goals is to be able to answer confidently in the classroom when the teacher asks a question, because it can be really anxiety producing when everybody's looking at you, the teacher's expecting an answer, and you're like, I need a little more time to think about this. I was drifting off a little bit, but it doesn't mean, am I a bad person? The kid is in there thinking, oh, am I a bad person because I don't know the answer, or that I drifted off a little bit. It's hard for kids to keep attention for a long period of time. That's why it's important, they're getting up and doing things, having breaks. And so that can be hard. They process differently, they learn differently. And when I say differently, it's different from what the schools are teaching. It doesn't mean it's odd. When I say different, it just means they're just on their own journey, and that's okay. We all are. We are all on our own journey. They think deeply, and so they need more time to respond. It's really hard for a student that's ADHD, neurodivergent, sensitive, to be able to answer a question like that. They really need to process it a little bit longer. Schools, they just see this one size fits all, and that's just not good for all the kids, again. And that goes into the next point, the dangers of comparison. I remember when I was a teacher and I had to teach them how to take a test, the state test. And we would have our benchmarks. I'm not sure what they call them today, but the practice test basically. And, you know, a lot of the kids would fall below average on the benchmarks. And they would just be so distraught. And so they needed extra tutoring. They needed all this extra stuff when it's like, as a teacher, it hurt my heart so bad. I didn't want them to think they were less than. If I knew they had tried their best and I knew that they were smart in their own way, not maybe book smart, test smart, but they had their own abilities, I didn't want them to feel badly about themselves. And I feel like the comparison and falling below average really puts them in this lack of self-love, low self-esteem, and that can increase their chance of dropping out of high school. If they're not believed in, they're not seen for their unique skills. So the dangers of comparison when it comes to education, educators are doing it. Oh, you're above average. Oh, you made an A. That's awesome. Oh, you're below average. We need to do more work. You're average. It's just a lot of labeling, and everybody's on their own journey. There's some people that really cannot learn to really understand and comprehend reading until their teen years. And it's not a bad thing. We force our kids to learn how to read so early. Instead of having time to play and be creative, a lot of kids are forced to learn math and just get ahead, know how to read, do math. Of course, there's some kids that are naturally able to do that quickly, but some that aren't. They're more creatives, and their brain doesn't work that way, and it's okay. And I want these students to know that it's okay where you are. But traditional schools do not do that. They don't make it okay. And that really hurts my heart. And the comparison social wise too, a lot of these types of kids that are sensitive, neurodivergent, beating to their own drum, a lot of them don't want to fit into the mainstream. I've noticed with many of them that I've worked with, they don't want to fit in. They like themselves and having their few friends that they can relate to. They don't need big groups. And so that moves into the social expectations. They can be exhausted when parents, educators are trying to push them into these big group dynamics of you need to try out for cheerleading, you need to try out for this sports, you need to try out for this and that, so that you can find your place in the world, you can find your group. Um, and they're trying to do it because I think that's what they're supposed to do, when in reality, they really don't need it. And I'm guilty of this. I didn't do a lot of extracurricular activities growing up, but as a parent, and so as a parent, I'm very lax in that. I mean, my daughter's homeschooled, super unique, creative daughter. Not very social, very different from me. I was very shy, but I was also social at the same time. I worked out of my shyness over the years. By the end of my high school years, I was a lot more outgoing. But sometimes I'm guilty of trying to find her more friends and groups to be involved in because I want her to have all, like, the social fun that I had as a kid. I had so many different social groups to turn to, friends here, friends there, and I needed that. I liked it, you know. I am an Aquarius rising. I love to form community, be part of a group, but I also like to stand out. And so with her, she's so creative, she's so sensitive. She's a Cancer moon, a Pisces sun, and a Libra rising. So she's a very sensitive soul. And I have to remember she's different. She doesn't need what I needed. I don't need to make sure she has all these groups of friends. She just needs a few good friends she relates to. And the same thing with many of these kids that are, we see as sensitive, neurodivergent, emotionally overwhelmed. A lot of them don't need large social groups. They just need a little bit. And they like to spend a lot of time alone. They're perfectly fine with that. And us trying to force anything else on them is just giving them emotional overwhelm. And they do need a lot of downtime. I think many people do need a lot of downtime. I've come across some of my students that don't. They just love to go, go, go and to be around people all the time. They don't need a lot of alone time. And that type of student, probably thrives more in a big group class. But many really need some downtime. I remember when my daughter was going to school, I would just see the light drain out of her. At the end, when I'd pick her up, it was like the light was draining. She was so exhausted. And every day she would ask me, Mommy, why is school so long? Why is school every day? And it would break my heart because I was like, why is it so long? This is draining on kids. If they had more playtime and social time, it would be different. I know a lot of schools are putting in 2 recesses now and extending recess to older kids, like 6th graders, which I think is really good. But a lot of them aren't. They're still jam-packing the kids with how much science can you learn, history, language arts, it's so overwhelming. So, yeah, these kids, they need some downtime, and this is why when they come home, they might act out because they need that downtime. And another point is they're constantly masking. They're constantly holding in um, their emotions, their stems if they have them, their voice. They're holding in a lot of who they are because they're trying to fit into this expectation. And that masking all day can lead them to act out at home. I know I did, and I feel super bad about releasing anger onto my mom when I would get home because I had so many emotions going on through the day. Like something happened and I felt really insecure about it. And I kept thinking about it in my head, like, I wish that didn't happen. I hope they don't think this, just all kinds of thoughts going in my mind of what they're thinking because of what I said, or somebody saying something rude to me. And I'm just taking it so personally, or a teacher being really tough on the class, or, oh gosh, in my school, the behavior was so bad. There were some times when the teacher couldn't even teach because some of the kids just took over the class, and just that was emotional exhausting watching my teacher give up, watching these kids misbehave, and I'm sitting there taking in all these emotions. And, these kids that are super sensitive and picking up on people's emotions, that's really emotionally exhausting. And they're sitting there masking, keeping themselves quiet, not saying anything. Some of them are super honest and have some courage to speak up, and that's great. A lot of them stay very introverted and quiet and just hold it in. They get home, basically just let it all out to the family members because they know that's a safe place. And then I will get parents finding me because their child has um, anxiety at home, anger. They'll even tell me, "Oh, the teachers think my kid is so good and does so well in class, but at home she's just tormenting everybody." And that's just because they've held in so much and they've are emotionally exhausted and just like school is so long and they have to do it for so long. Where else are they going to let it out? And so in my coaching, I help them find healthy ways of releasing that anger instead of doing that towards family members. And when I was growing up, my major thing that I did was journaling. Every day I would come home and write in my journal about my emotions of the day, and it helped me a lot. Now I teach kids to do some shaking, journaling, doing some kind of physical activity to move the stuck emotions through the body is important. Also, humming is really helpful. There's a lot of things, and each kid is different. So I like to teach different tools to see which tools work best for them. I want them to try everything, and then whatever they click with, that's what I encourage them to do every day as a daily habit, whether it's humming, tapping, shaking, or all of it. The kids that are sensitive, introverted, the more creative, neurodivergent, maybe on the spectrum, are diagnosed with any kind of learning disabilities. To me, it's not a disability. There's gifts. Their strengths are overlooked in the traditional school setting. I know it's hard to find other avenues for your kids. I know with me and my small town, there's really not an alternative school that feels good for my child. So we just do homeschooling. I would really like to have a micro school, kind of hybrid school here where I live for teens, because that's another thing for teenagers. It's really hard to find anything like that. For the young kids, there's lots of things, but the teenagers, some of them are already taking college courses and jobs and stuff, but mine's a young teen. And we do a co-op once a week, which has helped. And so finding co-ops, any hybrid or micro schools, or just an alternative school that's geared towards alternative learning would be really helpful. And so if you want some extra guidance, some mentorship for your child, I am definitely available to help. I do online coaching one on one. I also do some group classes on Outschool mostly. But my private coaching is really helpful for those kids that really just need an outside of the family mentor guide to help them feel validated, seen, and to teach them different tools that they can use. And I just really want to empower these kids and help them feel comfortable here on this planet, grounding themselves, knowing that they have a purpose here and that they do have the power within them to feel balanced, grounded, to protect themselves from other people's energy, um, and to realize what their dreams are and go after their dreams and make their dreams happen, and to really honor who they are and build that self love, the self trust. If you're raising a sensitive or neurodivergent child, a child that is different from the mainstream, doesn't fit into school well, please follow my channel. I share tools, encouragement, and practical strategies to help these amazing, unique kids build confidence and shine as their authentic self. Have a great day.